Welcome everyone to Melfuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Unreal Season 2 Episode 8. It's called Fugitive. So spoilers for the episode as always. And this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Board Now for picking the show. So we had pretty big stuff go down at the end of last episode with Darius and his cousin and the cops and all that stuff. And I was curious to see how this was going to play out, especially with Rachel going off to a hospital with her mother at the end of last episode. And if I have one critique to kind of get out the way quickly, it would maybe be that it feels like she just kind of gets out of that very easily and very quickly early in the show. It doesn't... The way Coleman just goes there and appears, I almost thought it was like her imagining something because it felt too easy, because I just expected it to be more of a hurdle to get her out of there. But that's kind of it. That's my only real critique, because ultimately everything it does and reveals what does plot as the episode goes on, I really liked. I was into. It was, pretty tense and thrilling with what we find out. So, I don't want that to sound too much of a harsh critique. It was like one little thing early on where I'm almost like, well, did they have to take her to a hospital? Maybe she could have just went to her mum's house at the end of last episode and it was less of a prison break, if you will. I mean, no, it was a prison break. She was free to go, but it felt very easy given that the entire cliffhanger at the end of the last one was Rachel going off to the hospital. But there's a lot of really, really good writing in this episode. In particular, this sort of dangling question of how much Coleman cares about Rachel and how much he cares about her versus how much he just likes the idea of being partners in crime with her if they can both be successful and possibly even use her ideas for his own success, whatever. It's something that Quinn's been very critical of, is this idea that he'll just be her chat at some point down the road. And we have not necessarily seen enough evidence to suggest that that's true or false, or if she's just projecting, which is something that I've definitely felt before. But there is notably a moment in this episode where I did actually feel like, oh no, I think you're being very slimy here, and I don't like it. It's once he gets her out of the hospital, he sits her down in his office, and by this point he's been basically fired from the show. He still get a job at the network until his contract runs out, but he's not the showrunner anymore. He's not got any power here. He brings her back to his office and sits her down. He's got a camera already set up, and it's recording onto a laptop. And she notices the camera and asks about it, and he's basically saying, hey, we have to get this all on the record. They're trying to cover everything up that happened. They're trying to pin it all, or tide it all so that they don't have to deal with it, and that's bullshit. This is the story we've been looking for. This is horrible what's happened. You were the one running at them when they shot the black man instead of you. This is what we could finally use to tell our story, to tell a story that's going to make us break through into the next barrier of the TV land or whatever. But the entire time he's doing this, she is out of it. She is barely awake. She is drugged up. She is not all there. She's not comprehending everything. It feels like she's only just barely forming sentences together. And she even asks, oh, is this why you took me out of there? And notably, when he was convincing her to leave, he said he was in love with her, and she said, I love you back. So they had kind of an important romantic moment when they were leaving the hospital together. But here, she asked, is this why you actually took me out of the hospital so I could record this video? And he says, no, of course not. But I don't think we should miss this opportunity. I don't think we should let this go away from us. And he's still talking with ambition. He's still talking about their future and what they can do for success and all the rest of it. And regardless of what he's saying here, the way he's propping her up when she can barely sit up straight and she's struggling to form sentences and she looks really sleepy at the very least, if not just completely out of it, felt like the first time it really felt like he is pushing this, even though it could wait. Even if he's technically not right per se, because I think that's open to opinion, but even if he truly believes this is the right thing to do for both of them and it's what they should do, it should be something he talks to her about so that she agrees, and then they can do it in a couple of days maybe when she's had time to rest, to recuperate, to be back on her feet and feeling 100% again, whatever. But the way he's propping her up here, literally like a prop, and saying, hey, start talking, even though he does it with a smile on his face and he's doing it in a very considerate way and all the rest of it, it felt slimy, and it's the first time I really felt like, oh, Quinn might just be right. She may just be right about Coleman. And the funny thing is that I think she's right, but I don't think he knows, or I don't think he thinks he's that. I think he thinks he's a nice guy. He thinks he's the good guy for Rachel. He thinks he's the white knight, the champion, the good guy. But I think what we're seeing as the audience is that that's what he thinks he is, not what he actually is. And that he's still doing stuff for his own gain, even if he's convinced himself it's also good for Rachel. And even the ending with Yael, obviously she reveals she's a reporter this episode, and by the end he's going to want to work with her to try and take, because if he can't be successful at Everlasting, he'll be successful tearing it down, perhaps, regardless if that's good for Rachel or not. And I think that's the good thing of the writing here that really, really works, is that this entire segment of him getting her to talk here, it's all presented under the guise of, this is what's best for you, Rachel. I'm doing what this is best in your interest. I'm doing this for you, but it feels like it's really for himself. And then it turns out later in the episode, when the mum shows up again, when Rachel's mum shows up with another psychiatrist to get a second opinion, to sort of basically like get the medical opinion that she should be like held for 72 hours because she's a danger to herself or whatever, and they come and talk to her. It's very interesting that all of this is about doing what's best for Rachel. Her mum's saying all the same things pretty much in different language, but it's effectively the same stuff that Coleman was saying about how we should do this, we should do that. But the thing is that when she was recording this statement to camera for Coleman, she kind of started to really open up. She even talked about Mary, and although to be fair, he did push her there. He did bring up Mary himself and wanted to hear about Mary. He pushed her in that direction, and we cut away and we come back, and he's clearly heard everything. And Rachel straight up says into the camera, "We killed her." Right? She takes that responsibility on and says, "This is something we did. We are responsible for this, and we got away with it, or we should have went to jail, whatever." She's in a very sharing mood. She's in a very I want to unload myself of my burdens mood. In a weird way, Coleman might have actually given her something that she in some way has needed, which is a way to actually open up about everything. Because when this other therapist is there and the mother's arguing, you need to come back to the hospital, it's what's good for you, you never stay long enough, you always come back to this cesspool. There's also a scene with Quinn here I want to talk about, which is also very good. But as soon as Rachel hears something to the effect of, "Oh, you should open up about what's going on," she's like, "You know what, Mom, you're right. I do want to open up about what's messed me up." And the second she implies she's going to start talking about her childhood and her history that her mother's obviously also involved in, that's been heavily hinted since her introduction in season 1, the mother completely changes and turns around and says, "You know what, this is a family matter, I'll keep an eye on her. I don't think we should be prodding her anymore." And the other therapist clearly thought he was getting somewhere with the answers that Rachel was giving, and feels like he's been cut off. And he's not got the power here to sort of say, "No, I'm going to pull rank here and do this." He kind of just has to accept what he's been told. But it's very notable that he can tell the mother is suddenly putting a shield up, and the mother is immediately shutting this down. We are not having her talk to another therapist about her past. And immediately, this idea that she keeps saying it's what's best for Rachel, the same way that Coleman keeps saying it's what's best for Rachel, it's what's best for Rachel, but it's actually about saving herself and saving her own career and saving her own practice. And we don't get the full scope of that until she talks to Coleman, of course, and actually says out loud what the mother's covering up. But even in this moment, Rachel says something vague that alludes to this idea that it's about her protecting her own career because she could lose her entire, practice. Her job as a therapist could be completely down the drain because of what she did. Now, the reveal of what it actually is, to the credit of the show, I didn't get it exactly, because the way it messed her up so bad that because I don't really remember much of what they've said about her father, and I'm sure they probably did back when the mum was introduced, but I was thinking, oh, did the dad do something really bad, assuming he was around at that time. I don't remember what they said about him, but I was right in that there was a sexual assault that took place. What I did not see coming was that it was one of the mum's patients who was visiting the house that did this when Rachel was 12. That's what she tells Coleman. And there's this idea that the mum keeps saying, oh, I kept all this secret for you because people would stay away from you because you'd be too damaged. They'd run away from you. So Rachel kind of says this out to Coleman and even says, I understand if you want to run away, if I'm just too damaged. She basically just regurgitates the exact things her mum's been drilling into her head. And Coleman does hug her. He does try and, console her and make it clear that he's not running away. Of course, by the end of the episode, he's sneaking off in the night to plot with the IL about taking this place down. So I do question, is he just, again, pretending to be the good guy for now, because it would be monstrous to just immediately run away? Can he not accept that he wants to run away if that's indeed what he wants to do? But it was a hard hitting reveal. It felt like all of a sudden this idea that our mother has been keeping her so close to the chest, and this idea that she's no, only I can be your therapist, only I will talk to you about what you're going through, is because the thing that messed her up the most as a kid is something that was kind of her fault to an extent, and something that, it'd be one understandable thing if it happened and the mother did all the right things afterwards, where clearly this access to her child should have been there. But if she, immediately went to the police, reported everything, regardless of the consequences, that'd be one thing. But the fact that she has covered it up to save her own ass and gaslit her daughter for years into just thinking she's got mental problems, and she definitely does have mental problems now, right? And she probably would have had some mental problems, but it feels like a lot of her problems are because her mother's been gaslighting her since she was 12, and instead of being there in her time of need and trauma, was molding her for her own thing. So, and again, the entire thing that Rachel does on this show is manipulate people into getting them to do what she wants for the sake of the show. Her mother's been manipulating her whole life, by the sounds of it. So, she's got some mummy issues, I guess, is the sinister. I guess that's the thing, is that I it's almost a trope to assume the dad did something really bad, and while the mother personally didn't do the physical act, it's actually almost more shockingly horrific to find out what the mother's part in all this has been, because it's less conventional, because I couldn't quite have seen that coming. So, yeah, I mean, congratulations for the gut punch, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, I do think that this comparison of Coleman and the mom, and this guise of doing what's best for Rachel, and I think that's where you bring the comparison to Quinn in an interesting way, where Quinn and Rachel have had their ups and downs, for sure. It is very interesting in this episode that when the mother shows up, and Quinn doesn't even know Rachel's back on set at this moment. She's not even aware that she's out of the hospital. She comes to confront the mother, and honestly, it was kind of cathartic just having Quinn not hold her punches a little bit. She was just straight up accusing the mum of all sorts and not letting her feelings about her parenting skills go unsaid. She wasn't holding her punches, like I said. It almost felt like, hey, she's not the best mother in the world, right? And this the subplot of this episode even is Quinn deciding if she wants to try and have a kid with her boyfriend, which, and I'm glad they talked about her maybe being too old, because I was thinking, isn't she a bit old to have a baby? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's obviously extreme cases of older women, but I think Quinn's in her late 40s, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken. But so it's interesting that this debate, this confrontation happens in the same episode. Quinn's talking about having an actual child of her own, but this idea that she's kind of become a mother figure for Rachel in some ways, and for all of her faults and for all of the weird abuse that she kind of is party to on this show, and she is the one who helped cover up a bunch of things on this show. Now she does claim that it's what's best for Rachel. She says that to Coleman even in this episode, that covering all this up, because the person who's going to take the fall for all of this is Rachel. She's the one who called the police. She's the one who ran out there and caused the incident in the moment. It's all going to fall on her. She's protecting her. Now, maybe you could argue that that's not necessarily the right thing either. Maybe you should maybe there should be some consequences for her to learn from what she's done, but none of it seems as bad as her actual mother at this point. Like, then now it's like, oh, by comparison's sake, Quinn's like an angel, and she's very tough loving, but it does seem like she's always at least thinking about Rachel's like well-being to some extent. I mean, at least in her own warped way. So it's a very interesting comparison point there. But yeah, this episode was obviously doing a lot for this particular element of it, right? Rachel's screen time is probably the lowest it's been in like any episode of the show, but what she does have in here is like so monumental for her character, and the themes of how everyone around her, you know, whether it's intentional or unintentional, and for the most part it's unintentional, how they treat her and how that kind of warps back round to like how she is with people and how she treats people is, you know, it's kind of like, you know, we get introduced to a very damaged character in a lot of ways right from the start of the show. I mean, the show even said, hey, she had a breakdown, you know, before this season started. That's what our introduction to Rachel was. And we've spent now almost 2 full seasons trying to deconstruct and understand why she is as broken as she is, and why things do seem to go a certain way. And it's not all on her. Like I said, there's characters around her who are doing certain things, you know, Quinn, her mother, Coleman this season, that are, you know, influencing in one way or another. But it's a very in-depth character. There's a lot of layers to it, and I think that you know, the show has given me flawed characters that you can kind of root for despite them having done something bad, or something awful. In the case of Rachel, herself feeling guilty about certain things that have happened on the show means that she's not like a lost cause from the audience's perspective, right? And that all of this was before we even knew what happened to her. This was all just based on the judgment of like seeing her actions and how she responds to them. Obviously, finding out like kind of the origin of her story now adds this extra element to it, which is a little bit different. But yeah, a lot going on there. Yeah, so, and I also don't think it's an accident, obviously, that sex is a big part of this show in terms of themes, right? In terms of talking about sex, and even this very episode, there's multiple references from Quinn about Chet and Madison's one thing from late last season. Was that the start of this season? I don't know. They're blurring together. I can't remember exactly when that happened, but when Madison gave Chet a blowjob. And there's a couple of moments here, and they're played for laughs. So they're mostly just like Madison's excited that she's doing well as a producer, and Quinn will kind of give her a little quip. And she'll kind of congratulate her and say she did a good job. But there's actually one great line where she says something about how, putting your boss's dick in your mouth isn't the only quick and short way of like making your way to success or something. It was something like that, but it was like a dig at her, but it was also like a dig at Chet as well in one package. And I thought that was quite funny. Quinn was quite sharp this episode, but them hinting at that or talking about that and reminding you is for a couple of reasons. One, it keeps your mind in the subject of an older man and a younger woman. But also, it's foreshadowing the fact that Tiffany is going to be attracted to Chet. And that's something that's revealed this episode. Because they don't know where Darius is, they're doing a whole thing where the girls are going to like vote on who gets to leave, right? And Tiffany's freaking out because they all hate her, and they all know she's the biggest threat, that Darius likes her, blah, 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 blah. And Chet kind of like takes her aside and promises her, I'll help you win this thing. It fails because he doesn't have all the answers to the quiz that they're going to ask them, so that doesn't quite work. And then she thinks she's leaving, she's upset, and Chet's saying, hey, look, I'll help you get your own show, you can be the Bachelorette kind of thing, and there'll be like 15 guys, you can make your pick, you can have success. And she's like, oh, you must really want to get, involved in my dad's football team. And he's like, not really. Like, he was only doing that when he thought he had a chance with Quinn, but now that's not a thing anymore. That seems to, because he's seen her with the boyfriend now. He's seen her talking about having a baby. He's even had a fight with her about it. But you never wanted that, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, wait, so why are you even offering this then? And he's just kind of like, well, cause look at you, you're a complete package. You're beautiful, you're smart, you're quick-witted, blah, blah, blah. And he says a bunch of things. And she actually leans in and kisses him, because part of me was thinking, oh, is this going down the route of him just having the hots for the young, hot babe? Because, it wouldn't be out of character for Chet to just be doing that. But she's the one who makes a move. I actually laughed out loud when he's kind of shocked at the kiss and kind of looks at her like, what? And she's like, come on, I've got daddy issues. I did think that was funny. I thought that was a funny line. But what's funny about that, though, is that in the next couple of segments, when Darius does come back up and saves her from elimination and kicks out the lady who's a cop, immediately Chet's looking a little jealous, and then he's looking really jealous when he sees her and Darius going off and having a night together at the end of the episode. So he's in an interesting new pickle where he's got someone else to be jealous about. But I mean, it's weird to say that it's growth that he's now got the hots for the young blonde, but in a weird way, if he's finally truly given up the idea of Quinn and he's stopped trying to chase her, then maybe this is growth in some weird way for Chet. I mean, it's the best I can say. Which does lead to talking about Darius, and by extension, also Jay, who features heavily in his plot. We also find out Romeo's okay. His cousin Romeo's okay. He's in hospital. So was Darius. Darius is walking with a cane at the moment. The first time we see him in this episode, though, is actually him meeting Ruby at like a diner somewhere. And he's invited her there to talk. He tries to tell her that, he's realized that he wants to be the man that she wanted from him, and that maybe he wants to do more things now after this, experience he's went through. And she chews him out and says, what the hell, you embarrassed me on TV. You basically told everyone that I'm unlovable, that I'm like, high maintenance, that I'm this, I'm that. And he gets a little bit frustrated, and he's like, please don't twist my words. I didn't really mean it to sound like that. And he's trying to make this grand statement, and she's wanting none of it. She walks off. Do I like this scene even before Jay shows up, because he's looking for Darius. They're all looking for Darius, but Jay's the one who finds him. I liked it because it felt real to me that he genuinely cared about Ruby. They sold me on that back when she was on the show, but it also felt very real to me that she wouldn't forgive what he did. So I like this idea of him crawling to Ruby, and I could totally have seen a world where she maybe was more receptive, or at least willing to hear him out and maybe try something. But she even points out, like, hey, you, on a stage, in front of a TV camera, you said this, and this, and I walked off crying. It was humiliating. And now you're confessing love to me in like hidden a little diner somewhere where no one can see. She's making some valid points, and she is expressing her feelings, and you can kind of get why she wouldn't want to forgive him and wouldn't want to be like near him. And even he admits that he can't play football anymore, that's it for him. He can't, that's not an option, and it does not work. So I like that scene. I just thought it was very true to both characters in a really nice way that didn't feel too neat. It didn't feel like it wrapped up like neatly in a bow where now they're living happily ever after or anything. I don't think it's out of the realm that maybe she'll come around perhaps down the line. Who knows what the last couple of episodes will have. But I think in this scene it felt very natural and real for both characters to act the way they did. When Jay shows up, it gets a little bit more interesting, I thought, because Jay basically is saying, look, it's probably best that you come back to the show. And obviously, I'm thinking, like, why would he ever? Like, what? At this point, you've gotten his cousin shot, and you're lucky he's not dead. It's been a horrendous experience, pretty much through and through all the awkward situations he's been put in. And I mean, Jay does make a convincing argument, don't get me wrong. He's like, hey, like, if you're truly done playing football, like, if you walk away now, this is going to end in some sort of weird non-ending where, nothing will happen. But if you have a fairy tale happy ending, you pick the girl that everyone's expecting, have the happy marriage with Tiffany, then, you've resuscitated your image, and that's all fine. And Darius points out that he'd feel a little bit bad just using her because he's not, like, he likes her, but he's not in love with her. He doesn't really want to marry her. And Jade just kind of says, well, yeah, do you think she's using you a little bit as well? Like, as long as you both know you're both, like, benefiting each other within an arrangement, as long as you both know that you're here not just for the traditional love element of it all, then is that such a bad thing if you both agree to that? If you're both benefiting from this arrangement to both, you know, raise your status, your caliber, whatever, blah blah blah. There's also an interesting little bit as well where you know, Darius points out that just because Jay's black doesn't mean that he's not part of the, I think he puts it, the machine, the system that he's been grinding through. And Jay says, yeah, I know I'm part of the system, like I know that, but like, here's my advice, is that you have been fighting the system the entire way. Let the system work for you. Like, you manipulate it in your own way, make sure you get the results you want, and you know, let it go through. So it felt like just a really interesting conversation where Jay's been this kind of character to the side, and he's got these catty little one-liners, and he's had nice little bits of commentary here or there. But I feel like this season he was elevated in part because they had a black suitor, so he had a lot more kind of like more poignant commentary to give. But I think certainly this last episode or two, between like last episode when the police were called and he found out about that and chewed out Rachel for it, and in this episode, this conversation with Darius, I feel like Jay's really benefited here from a bit more screen time, a bit more meaty scenes to like sink his teeth into. I feel like he's a more fleshed out character this season in a big way, rather than just being the competition for Rachel, which is kind of what he was in season 1. So I think that's cool. There's a couple of fun scenes where they're trying to produce the girls, and basically they're trying to like save Tiffany from the vote, and it doesn't work because all three of them want to vote her out. And that's all fun and amusing, and that's just the typical everlasting stuff in the background, and the little comments Quinn's making as the presenter's saying stupid stuff on camera. But I mean, all that stuff is kind of secondary to the main meat of the story that we were talking about. I guess I should sort of wrap back round to talking about Yael, or AKA Hot Rachel, who's even moving in Coleman at this point. But yeah, she's wanting to write a story about everlasting and how it's kind of killing people. I don't know if that's necessarily what the initial pitch was, but that's certainly what it's turned into, given that she's found out about Mary, about what's been happening recently, so on and so on. And initially Coleman, says, you're talking to a drunk, Jeremy doesn't know anything, he's unreliable. But by the end of the episode, it seems like he's going to her with what he's learned about Mary, with more details from Rachel. Now, part of me thinks he might not necessarily implicate Rachel herself in this, or he thinks he might not have to, or he thinks it's what's best for her regardless, and he's going to try and talk her into it later, or he's just straight up doing all this behind her back, and he doesn't care that it'll throw her under the bus because he's, maybe he's not being as genuine with his feelings as we thought. He's posing a little bit, one might say, but yeah, that's our big plot hook at the end of the episode, and it's a fine plot hook. It's perfectly fine. But I think for me, all the meat of this episode was the Rachel stuff and her backstory and the different people around her, all kind of having their great scenes on their own and different pairings was really good. And then all the stuff with Jay and Darius, that was for me the good stuff. And I just to mention, Darius just kind of storms in a big surprise entrance and says, no one's eliminating anyone but me, and he kicks someone else off the show, and he's like, we'll do things my way. And then when he's off camera, he says to Quinn that, hey, I'm done talking to you, I'm done talking to Rachel, you want to talk to me, you talk through Jay, and this Kane never appears on TV. So, he's taking charge of the situation. He's not, and I think this is a kind of refreshing little direction to, if he's staying on the show, which he clearly is now, I think to separate him from how Adam's story was wrapping up last season, having someone who's just like, no, I'm done with this bullshit, I'm dictating what happens now. And it makes me wonder if he'll be less of a source of drama in the next 2 episodes. Like, I'm sure he'll be around, I'm sure they'll finish out the season, and there'll be some this or that, but it seems like he's not going to let Rachel or Quinn try and manipulate him in any way. Maybe he'll be unsuccessful, perhaps, but I do like this idea that he's like, I know, F you, I'm not talking to you two anymore. Like, we're done with this bullshit. So, very good. But anyway, that's my feelings on this episode of UnReal. It was very, very good. These last couple of episodes have been excellent. It's really going interesting places for this back chunk of the season. I also love that the Mary incident, her death in season 1, is still like a big deal. I love that that's still coming up and still this thing that really is weighing on Rachel and possibly some other characters' minds, because it felt like a huge deal at the time, and it would be very like typical TV for it to just be forgotten about after a couple episodes. I like that it's still being brought up, it's still lingering, especially for characters who are feeling guilty about it. I like that quite a bit. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode if you've seen it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MaileFuzzTV or via YouTube membership if that's more your thing. But thanks to everyone who already does. It does make this all possible. So thank you very much. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?